What's up guys, ATCZ here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we have a true Draco deck profile. Finally, Konami is starting to give us back pieces of the deck. We got True King's Return back to 2, and this is a good sign that we're probably going to get it at 3 next list, and hopefully after that Konami is going to start giving us back copies of Dynamite, so the deck can actually see the light of day again, because since Card of Demise and Diagram went to 1, the deck pretty much lost all of its popularity, and was always a pretty popular thing out in the anti-meta community, because it had this inherent synergy with floodgates, but now the deck is so inconsistent that people have just dropped it completely. So I think it will be fun if we have a new deck in the format that can actually counter all those meta decks. So it's a pick that a lot of people go to, just because it's an easy deck to pick up, it's an easy deck to play. It's very fun if you try to get the win condition going. So I'm going to show you how the pure version of the deck works. We have a Domain Monarch with True Draco stuff in it. It's basically kind of a hybrid deck that I think is more gimmicky, but I know a lot of people want to see just a pure version of the deck, how it's supposed to be played, so this video is for you. So before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So to start off with the monsters, we have one copy of Dynamite. Hopefully we will get more copies of this card, because as long as we get more copies of Dynamite, we'll start cutting the other True Draco monsters, because Dynamite is by far the most important one, because it gives you trap cards, so it gives you more disruption during your opponent's turn, and resolving anything else like Ignis or Majesty Maiden during your opponent's turn. Yes, it does give you advantage, but it doesn't really give you anything to disrupt them, because you don't really get access to any of your traps that you can tribute summon during your opponent's turn to pop more monsters. So Dynamite's by far the best True Draco we have access to, so I think we might be able to get more copies after a couple ban lists. 3 copies of Ignis Hit. Ignis Hit is really good going second, especially with the return of Zodiac in the meta, because if you tribute a trap to summon Ignis Hit and you use the trap to try to bait the Trident, they have to use the Trident in order to pop the Ignis, otherwise they will just lose the Trident without getting any value. And then if they do that, you can activate Ignis to get a Heritage on the field, and because you already tribute a trap and Trident popped your Ignis, then Heritage can draw you 2 cards, so Ignis is much better going second, and Dynamite is the best one going first. 2 copies of Majesty Maiden. I am playing one more monster in the deck, which if you do not really want to play that monster, I would suggest maxing out on Majesty Maiden, because you need more copies of monsters. Since Diagram is at 1 right now, you don't really get to easy access them whenever you want to, so you need to be able to hard draw them, because if you do not have any monster in your hand, you will not be able to use the Monarch's Rapt, which is basically one of the best win conditions of the deck, so you need to be able to tribute summon a monster just to make sure that this card is live. So playing 3 Majesty Maiden is not bad, but 2 copies for this particular deck because of the next card I'm going to show you, which is 2 copies of Inspector Border. This card is an auto win against some decks. Against stuff like Eldritch it's really bad, but if you're playing against Virtual World or any other combo based deck, it's a really good card. And it's good going second sometimes, because even if your opponent has a field like full of negates, if they have like only synchro monsters on the field, they will only be able to use 1. And even if they have like 3 monsters that can negate, if they have synchros and links, they will only be able to use 2 of them. So you can just bait out some negates and then use the traps to be able to prop your opponent's board, which is what True Draco does. Going first, it tries to sit on floodgates in order to be able to stun your opponent, make sure that they don't get to their combo, and going second, they try to break your opponent's board. You can side cards like Amano Iwato for going second and replace Inspector Borders with it, because Amano Iwato is much better going second, because it doesn't let your opponent use any of the monster effects. But if you're going to main deck something, I think main deck Inspector Border is way better, just because you want to go first, so just slapping an Inspector Border on the field with a couple trap cards, just that is enough to win you the game. And you don't really care that it locks you from using your monster effects, because your monster effects are not that important. You just care about their attack points being high value and making sure your opponent does not play. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Heritage, pretty standard, 3 copies of Disciples. These 2 you need to max them out, of course. They will give you the draw power. Disciples also gives you the recyclability, so you'd never run out of True Dracos, so you need to be able to always have access to it. 1 copy of Diagram, 1 copy of Terraforming. Unfortunately, Diagram is at 1, and this was actually a bigger hit in the deck than Card of Demise going to 1, because yes, Card of Demise was the power play, but Diagram was the card that not only gave you access to any card you needed whenever you needed it, but it also fueled cards like Heritage and also helped you pop your own stuff, so you will pop your opponent's card as well. So this is why this card going to 1 hurt a lot, but still, it's something that the deck still has access to, so if you draw it, your plays are going to be so much better. 2 copies of Pot of Desires, a really good card, because even though you have 1-offs in the deck that, because of the ban list, you don't really care if you get them banished, because your win condition are not Diagram, they're not Dynamite, your win condition are the floodgates, so as long as you find access to maybe 1 monster and a floodgate, that could maybe will be enough to win you the game. And this deck desperately needs more drop power, especially since Card of Demise at 1 now, so you need to be able to use that. 3 copies of Pot of Duality. This card might actually become more of a less relevant thing when the new pot arrives in the new set, because it gives you access to up to 6 cards to excavate. It does use part of your extra deck, which is why I do not think in this particular deck it's going to be viable, just because you don't have an extra deck in this deck, so you can make more extra rep live. But if you see Pot of Duality in any other deck, maybe like Subterrors, then I think this card is going to get replaced very, very soon. One copy of Card of Demise, yes, it's at 1, but if you draw it, then yeah, you're going to have a hell of a time because you're going to get so much advantage because this deck particularly doesn't play a lot of monsters. So if you just summon the one monster you have, if you can draw 3 cards, you're basically going to win. And one copy of Upstart, I'm trying to maximize the consistency of the deck just because I need to see these cards, especially these floodgates, because if you don't see them, if you just see through Draco cards, yes, you can disrupt your opponent, but one pop is basically not enough to win you games these days. For the trap cards, we have 3 copies of True Draco Apocalypse. This card is actually much better than True King's Return, but still, if we get more copies of True King's Return, we're going to play them just because they're True Draco traps that help you get more monsters on the field while also destroying your opponent's monsters. But Apocalypse is much better because it helps you deal with monsters that are bigger than yours, so you can just use its effect on the damage step to cut your opponent's monsters attack in half. Your opponent cannot respond to it, and it also pops your own cards like your spell cards, so you'll be able to pop your opponent's back row, while True King's Return doesn't help you access those kinds of effects. 2 copies of True King's Return. This card's fresh off the ban list. Hopefully, next list we will get that 3, and after that, Konami might start giving us back copies of Dynamite to 2 and 3, and approximately in 3 more ban lists, the deck will have a lot more pieces in order to be able to compete. This card is a thing that gives you field presence, but it doesn't really help you advance your game state with your spell cards like the stuff like Draco Apocalypse, because your game state stays still as long as you don't pop those cards, and if you don't draw monsters, then you will not be able to pop those spells to get more access to more draws with Heritage and pop your opponent's back row. So if you have monsters in the grave, this card gives them back to you, which is something to use during your opponent's end phase, so you can have more monsters during your own turn to attack with. This is the thing that this deck needs in a lot of monsters in order to be able to go for game. You don't really have to go for game very quickly, but if you give your opponent turns to try to gather more resources, then one board wipe is basically enough to lose you the entire game unless you have a Solemn Judgment set, because this deck does lose Lightning Storm, and Harpy's Feather Duster is out now, so it has one more card that completely destroys the entire strategy of the deck, so you need to be able to win as fast as possible, and this is why True King's Return is a good card, because it gives you more monsters to attack with, and with Diagram being at 1, you cannot really have the OTK with the 3 monsters boosting them with Diagram, so you need to be able to get more monsters on the field just because you need the extra damage on the field. For the floodgates, we play 3 copies of Monarch's Erupt, by far the best one. It's better than Skill Drain because it doesn't lock your own effects, so you can use them even if you have this on the field, so you can get more advantage with your True Draco monsters. You do need to see a True Draco monster to have this live, which sometimes this card can be dead, yes, but it's so powerful that it's worth maxing out, of course, because just activating and resolving this card is more than enough to win you the game. So this is why I said that if you want to play Majesty Maiden at 3, it's perfectly fine to do it because of this card. You need to see a True Draco monster if you want to have this card live, and if this card is live, you're going to win the game. So this is why playing 3 Majesty Maiden, if you feel like it, it's perfectly fine. 2 copies of Lose One Turn. I wanted more cards that negate monster effects. Stuff like Anti-Spell Fragments and Imperial Order, I don't think they're that optimal anymore because we have decks like Eldritch, and while yes, Eldritch doesn't really use monster effects a lot, it does rely on other stuff in order to be able to go for game, because Eldritch on its own is not good enough, but it doesn't use any good spell cards aside from using the Elixir during the first turn, maybe to get Eldritch on the field if the deck is pure. So this is why monster negation is much better, especially now that we have stuff like Zeus, because if you let Zeus resolve under this deck, you're going to lose the game whatsoever. So you need to be able to stop the monsters from even attacking you, so your Zeus doesn't hit the field, and this card will also put the monsters in defense mode, so it helps you prevent them from attacking, on top of negating their card effects. So yep, this is why I really like this card in the deck. And 1 copy of Skill Drain, because Skill Drain is Skill Drain. It's at 1, but we're going to use it. If we ever get more copies of this card, then that would be perfectly fine, but I don't think we'll ever get to that point because this card is low-key busted. 3 copies of There Can Be Only One. Another really great card that can stop the Zodiac engine whatsoever, because they cannot slap Xyz monsters on top of each other. They're all Beast Warriors, so when they summon their first monster, you just use this and they will not be able to Xyz summon at all. Really good card, so you need to max it out, and you don't really mind if you get only 1 monster on the field. This is another reason why I really like Inspector Border, because if you're not playing Inspector Border and you have There Can Be Only One on the field, you will only be able to use 1 monster to attack every time. But if you have Inspector Border on the field, you have another 2k beater to attack with, so you don't really stall out the game too much and let your opponent draw one of its outs, so they can actually play the game. And 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. I really like Solemn Judgment just because we do have a lot of stuff right now that can counter this deck. Like I said, Harpy's Feather Duster is back in the game, so there's another thing that can destroy you. We have Lightning Storm, so yep, that's a blowout again. Evenly Matched, I think, is being seen less and less because it doesn't really do a lot against the current meta decks, aside from Eldritch, but Eldritch has adapted to being able to counter stuff like that. But some people still play Evenly Matched, so that's another card that completely destroys you. So I think Solemn Judgment is really good, and even if you don't have any of the Draco strategy, just having an Inspector Border on the field and a Solemn Judgment set can win you the game, because when your opponent opponent tries to summon a monster that will help you and use a monster effect in order to destroy Inspector Border, you just Solemn Judgment that, and you take the monster off the field so they don't have a monster from the extra deck anymore, so they're not able to use monster effects, so you just win with that, and hopefully you will draw to your engine during the following turn. So this is why Solemn Judgment is better. You can replace this with Solemn Strike if you want to be a little bit better going second, because if your opponent sets up a board and Solemn Judgment, yes, it's kind of useless, but Strike is really good at going second, especially if you combine it with something like a Monarch's Raptor or the Skill Drain. They will try to negate the Floodgate, because if they don't, they will just lose all their monster effects, and then you will use Solemn Strike to that monster effect negation, and because Solemn Strike is a counter trap, they will not be able to negate with one of their monster effects, so your Floodgate will resolve and basically will kill your opponent's entire board. So if you want more of a going second build, I would suggest replacing Judgment with Solemn Strike, but I think just siding in Solemn Strikes are much better, because like I said, you want to go first, of course, if you play with this deck, because it's a Floodgate deck. And of course no extra deck, because it's True Draco, you don't have to have an extra deck, and you don't need to have an extra deck, otherwise Monarch's Raptor will not be live. So yep, that's the deck, guys. It's a really good deck. It's getting better and better. The draw power is kind of an issue, but we play as many draw cards as possible to try to dig for the pieces we need, and this is the win condition of the deck. You dig for Floodgates, you get a monster on the field, and hopefully your opponent doesn't have an out, so you will win the game just by default, because their deck cannot play through Floodgates. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.